Okay, welcome back, and so timely to have back with us for a short session this morning, but always welcome Jim Burling. He is now the senior legal counsel there at the Pacific Legal Foundation. He has authored a book, which is Nowhere to Live, The Hidden Story of America's Housing Crisis, which in itself is an amazing topic and story. You can get it online, and go to pacificlegal.org. That is the website, and this organization is there fighting in your behalf, so support them. Jim, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you, Perry.
You bet. Thanks for a short visit, but so much going on. We're getting some interesting decisions that certainly has upheld some of the reinforcement of executive orders from the president as it relates to asylum and immigration. How significant are these?
I think these are quite significant. Congress passed some rather standard immigration laws that for quite a while have not been fully enforced. And the president has seen fit to say, look, I'm going to enforce them very much so in the case of people with a green card who have committed a crime, who leave the country and come back in. He is prohibiting those people from coming in. With respect to people with temporary protected status, such as hundreds of thousands of Haitians and Syrians, the president said, no, we're going to suspend that, terminate that status. And with respect to people coming close to the border and saying, I want asylum, I want political asylum, but not stepping inside the country, the court, the president said you have to be inside the country, as the statute says, in order to get asylum. But the key to all these cases is not the specifics of the asylum cases or the immigration status, but the president's authority. And the court made it clear in 3 of these decisions that the president has authority and that it is not for the judges to second guess that authority or to have their favored policy in place. And the court in one of these cases made it clear it did not really appreciate President Trump's remarks about Haitians, didn't think they were fair, but that they were not a ground for taking away the president's power to reduce the temporary protected status. So these immigration cases really are to strengthen the president's hand and to weaken the hand of the courts to second-guess executive orders.
Wow, so it's a two-win. It's executive authority as well as in enforcing, immigration law. Right. Yeah, this is really something.
Yeah, it is a double win for the president. And again, a future Congress can change the law if it likes, and a future president can enforce the law somewhat differently. But presidents have this power, and the courts are not the ones to decide the rules and make up essentially new rules as they come along.
Wow. Another case that came out was the court struck down Hawaii's law that prohibited carrying firearms on private property. This is a Second Amendment victory. What's your take?
This is in a tradition of cases that started a few years ago out of Washington, D.C., where the court said that the Second Amendment right to bear arms is an individual right. It's not a collective right. And the court has been consistently striking down state and local rules that have made it very difficult to carry guns. The more recent cases went out of Chicago and New York City, where people had the ability to carry guns and have them in their homes. Now, Hawaii tried a clever end run around it. Hawaii said, okay, you have a right to bear arms, but you cannot go anywhere with your guns unless you have express written permission from the landowner of the property. And so if you're driving to work and you want to get gas, that's illegal. If you want to go in your company parking lot, even leave the gun there, that may be illegal if you don't have express permission. And it made it, as a practical matter, impossible for the Second Amendment right to be exercised in the state of Hawaii. The court struck it down, and it did so looking at what it called the history of tradition of gun laws in America, and said when the Second Amendment was adopted and when it was applied to the states with 1868 with the Civil War amendments, the court looked at the history and tradition of laws at that time and said virtually all of the laws in place allowed people to carry guns freely, and Hawaii's laws are contrary to that.
Just curious, do you know where the citizens of Hawaii were on this case?
The citizens were mixed. I mean, I think a lot of people, Hawaii's a liberal state, and a lot of people don't like guns around. If you asked them, they probably said no, but there were a significant number of people that had the right to carry guns. They had the license to do that. They had the requisite training to do that. And those folks had this right that they could not exercise. So it's one of these things where sometimes what people in a community necessarily want is not necessarily what in comport with the Constitution. And rights cannot be taken away even by the majority if there is a right that's enshrined in the Constitution, such as the Second Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, so on and so forth.
Interesting. All right. Again, trying to squeeze a lot in here. What was the case involving Monsanto? This is quite controversial. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, so Monsanto manufactures Roundup. Roundup has glyphosate in it. Some people claim that glyphosate causes cancer. The EPA and indeed the European Union have concluded that there is no evidence that it causes cancer. Nevertheless, there have been a slew of lawsuits, many, many lawsuits against Monsanto, alleging that it caused cancer in the plaintiffs. Now, Monsanto says, and the plaintiffs are saying, you did not warn us about the cancer potential of Roundup. And Monsanto's defense was that under the Federal Insecticide, Rodenticide, and Fungicide Act, or known as FIFRA, we can only put labels on that are expressly approved by the EPA. And we had the labels that EPA told us to put on. And we're not allowed under federal law to put anything else on our label, such as a failure to warn of the possibility of cancer, and especially because we don't believe that the evidence Monsanto was saying shows that there is a possibility of glyphosate causing cancer. So this was really a preemption case where the federal law basically occupied the field of what you can put on a label for the Roundup that you're selling. And the court said because Monsanto did what the federal law told them to do, and they could not do anything else, there was no basis to sue in state courts over the failure to warn labeling for Roundup.
You think that's the end of this?
Oh, of course not. No. If I give the attorneys and the plaintiffs' bar credit, it is for great creativity. They have other ways to sue Monsanto, and they will continue to do that. But this does take a tremendous load off of Monsanto. It makes a lot of these cases much more difficult to prosecute because they couldn't. It was very difficult to prove cause and effect. So they were causing failure to warn in a labeling issue, and that was an easy out. Now they have a much harder job to do to prove that a particular person's cancer is actually caused by Roundup.
Yeah. I want to come back to the firearms case out of Hawaii just a little bit. And that is, how do you think this will play out in other states that are trying to regulate firearms and exposure? We have our own interesting cases here in Oregon where they're trying to regulate magazines and all that stuff. You know the drill. So the side effects of this Hawaii case could be fairly significant.
No, absolutely. And in fact, a number of states that have strong gun control laws filed friend of the court briefs in the Hawaiian case because they wanted to support Hawaii's law. So the bottom line is that whenever you're going to look at any gun control measure, you're going to have to measure it by, is this consistent with the history and tradition of gun laws as they existed when the Second Amendment was adopted and then readopted with the 14th Amendment in 1868. And at that time, there were no clear analogs to what Hawaii was trying to do. And if you're looking at a law regarding magazines or whatever other restrictions, restrictions on the number of bullets you can buy a year, you have to look at, is that consistent with the traditional laws that we've had dealing with guns? If the answer is yes, then it'll probably be okay. If the answer is no, then that law is likely to be struck down.
Okay. What's remaining to come out? What you got your eye on?
Well, of course, the birthright citizenship case is a big one that's coming out. We have a couple of cases dealing with the executive power, the president's power to fire heads of employees, government employees, agency heads, that kind of thing. The president's power over the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's another big one. We have a couple of cases dealing with whether trans athletes can be prohibited from competing on a women's sports team. So we have and we have another case dealing with geofencing, which is the ability to track somebody through their cell phones without a warrant. And of course, I should quickly mention that we had a property rights case where the Supreme Court held this week, that it was okay to have an auction to get less than fair market value for somebody's property, but it sent the case back down to see whether that auction was fairly performed. So we'll be looking at the follow-up from that case as well.
Have you ever seen a time where executive authority has been challenged like this?
I don't think so. I mean, I think for a long time we were sleepwalking into the present circumstance where executive authority was diminished somewhat, or Congress fell asleep in the sleep, and people didn't really care that much about separation of powers. But the current Supreme Court cares very much about the separation of powers. And it's especially an issue now because our particular president isn't very popular. And so there's a lot of pushback on what he's trying to do. So a lot of these cases that were sort of sleeping for a long time, these issues that were sleeping, are now wide awake and before the court, and will continue to be so in future terms.
Jim, thank you for letting us grab you this morning. Very important stuff, and you always give it to us. We value it greatly. And congratulations on now senior legal counsel there at the Pacific Legal Foundation. Check out his book on a subject that he's very passionate about, Nowhere to Live, The Hidden Story of American Housing Crises. Very, very resourceful. You can get that online. And of course, pacificlegal.org. This organization's there fighting for you. Support them. Thanks, Jim. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Good seeing you, too.
Okay.